From the moment Hervé Télémaque put down his brush and unveiled his painting Sirène in 1959, he demonstrated an uncanny ability to syncretize powerful and competing aesthetic impulses. Toying with abstraction, the work, with its wide strokes of blue and nimble black paint, might seem to fit in with the abstract expressionist aesthetic then in vogue at the famous Art Students League in New York, where he was a student at the time. But Télémaque was a lover of language and couldn't resist the chance to complicate our understanding with another layer of meaning. Sirène, of course, is French for mermaid. But in Haitian voodoo, a religion from his native country, La Sirène is a goddess of the sea. She moves fluidly between worlds, evoking thoughts of migration, the Middle Passage and the Black Atlantic cultural link between Africa and the Caribbean. At the center of the work is an orange frame, perhaps La Sirène's magic mirror, which acts as a portal between our universe and that of the spirits. Télémaque was a 22-year-old Haitian immigrant in America, at once drawn toward and excluded from the artistic world he sought to join. Pulling on all the threads of his lived experience thus far, he wove elements of his past and present, heritage and trauma, hawkishness and pride, into a single sophisticated canvas. He would return to these themes over and over for the rest of his career. His artistic hybridization was an expression of a social liminality, which he describes in an interview later in life.
Donc je dis toujours, je suis un peu haïtien, un peu américain et un peu français.
I always say that I am a bit Haitian, a bit American, and a bit French.
Je suis noir, je suis haïtien. Le rapport avec la langue est toujours pour moi très important. D'autant plus que je vis entre plusieurs langues.
The relationship with language has always been very important to me, especially because I live between several languages.
La peinture n'est qu'un langage de plus.
Painting is just another language. Welcome to Season 4 of Tomorrow is the Problem, an ICA Miami Art and Research Center podcast. I'm your host, Donna Honarpiche. This season, we foreground Haiti's influence on Miami, the city that the ICA calls home, by exploring and engaging with the Haitian communities in close proximity to the museum. As we host Haitian artists within the walls of the ICA and explore our own role as curators and as neighbors to these communities, we look outward to the political, cultural, and aesthetic worlds that inform artistic practices, and inward to our own identities and questions. For our final episode this season, we're exploring the work of Haitian diaspora artist Hervé Télémaque. Following his passing in the fall of 2022, ICA featured an exhibition dedicated to Télémaque's early work that foregrounded his work in pop art and abstraction, contributions to the Caribbean and global modernist movement. One of the preeminent painters of the post-war period, Télémaque developed his own fusion style as a Haitian émigré in New York and Paris. His resulting body of work is by turns epic and humorous, and inspired by Caribbean and global contexts. Télémaque's corpus provides a thought-provoking take on language and symbols, migration and movement, and violence and power through a transnational context.
What makes him distinctive is an engagement with these major movements of the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and on. But when you look at it closely, you realize that there are other stories being presented here that have to do with race, that have to do with a kind of a global modernism, specifically the kind of the South global modernism.
This is Richard Powell, professor of art history and African American studies at Duke University.
One of the books that's in my library is called Pop Art by Lucy Lepard. It's a book that came out like in the mid-1960s, and I probably picked it up at a secondhand bookstore years and years ago. One of the images in that book is a work by Hervé Télémaque, and it is a piece that I've been looking at for years and years and always been puzzled by it.
Hervé Télémaque's painting, Present Where Are You, is an exuberant and startling collage that defies immediate understanding. Bright strokes of orange and green draw the eye across the canvas, which is broken into rhomboid triptych. A real bag of coal swings in front of the painting, dangling over a white-gloved hand. A cartoon crow reminiscent of the infamous Jim Crow in Dumbo hovers in the upper right corner, ready to flee or descend on the viewer. Behind this crow, more gather, though their abstract outlines look more like bomber planes. Figures are in motion, but it's not immediately clear where they're going. The painting tilts on its axis, and it tilts the viewer's gaze with it.
And I kept on looking at this piece saying, where does this fit in the story of pop art? And it's always been kind of a piece that's stayed in my head. So now let's flash forward to 2016, when I have an opportunity to live in Paris for a year. And I've been asked, well, what is the project you want to do at the Institut National d'Histoire de l'Art? This is a kind of an art history think tank. And right out of my mouth was, I want to work on Hervé Télémaque. And I realized, well, this is somebody who is recognized in France. I said, I want to make him better known in the United States. I had never met him. I just knew his work from these reproductions, but I knew that there was a really important story here. So I moved to Paris and I called this guy up. I say, hello, my name is Rick Powell. I teach at Duke. You don't know me, but I really want to learn more about your work.
To Powell, Télémaque's artistic practice is indivisible from his Haitian origins.
You're born where you're born. And he is a witness growing up in the 1930s and 40s to American occupation and inequities that are rife as soon as you walk out the door. But he's also a witness to the kind of magic and genius of that place. So that despite, the revolutions and the setbacks in terms of politics, people's music and people's art and people's dance are something that he understands from Haiti that are a part of a very important heritage for him. The 50s was a tough time with the emergence of Duvalier. And so there was this whole exodus of fair-skinned Haitians and Creoles in the mid-1950s from Port-au-Prince and other cities. Often they came to Miami, and they also came to New York, and that's what Hervé did in the mid-1950s.
Papa Doc Duvalier's repressive regime endorsed Noirisme, forcing lighter-skinned Haitians, known at the time as Creoles, out of positions of power, and many artists and academics responded by seeking refuge outside Haiti. As part of this mass exodus, Télémaque arrived in New York in 1957, entering an art scene dominated by abstract expressionism. Here in the deeply segregated United States, he was forced to reckon with race in a way that was completely foreign to him. As a light-skinned member of the Haitian elite, his sudden immersion in what he called New York's ambient racism was a shock.
New York was very, very tough. He knows that if he wants to really achieve something, he's going to have to find another situation. And I think the crucible moment is when he goes to a gallery and he shows his work and he overhears the gallery people saying, well, I don't think we can handle this black man in our gallery. I mean, he just heard the racism kind of oozing out of these commentators in the back.
Télémaque felt himself to be American, or as someone in the American sphere of influence, because of the centuries of cultural overlap with his Caribbean birthplace. The recognition that he would not be truly welcomed as a bona fide citizen and must adapt or leave stung him deeply. In fact, he wrote, In New York, I became afraid of losing my identity. It was at this point that Télémaque painted Sirène, which we described at the beginning of the episode.
There's also this political dimension of it, that he has perhaps the psychic wounds, if you will, of exile that he carries with him. And so I think those things are kind of embedded in those works that we see.
In an attempt to heal or at least understand this psychic wound, Télémaque began psychoanalysis while living in New York, a practice and mode of relating that would give him greater awareness of the world around him as well as within himself.
Hervé's works from this time period sometimes subtly show kind of the psychoanalytic process, allowing him to kind of unveil these deep-seated feelings about being an immigrant, being kind of alienated in a big, wild, delightful city like New York.
One of his most intriguing pieces from this era is Toussaint Louverture in New York, which we've described in a previous episode. Erica Moya James, assistant professor of African, Black, and Caribbean art at the University of Miami, sees Télémaque's dance between representation and abstraction in the painting as indicative of his mental state. As he grappled with exile and prepared to leave yet another home, he returned to revolutionary leader Toussaint Louverture, a potent symbol of his homeland.
Representation isn't truth. We have to think of it in relation to abstraction because there's always loss in that representation. And when I look at Télémaque's work from the early 60s, for instance, I think about that a lot. With Toussaint Louverture in New York, for instance, that brush that if you're not looking carefully, you may miss. The reference to his very famous white steed. It doesn't necessarily make sense literally, right? But when you think about what's going on and when you think of him in terms of autobiography, when you think of what he's encountering in that space, you realize that it's a painting that opens up a world. The affect of that in that particular moment for him as an artist, a Haitian artist in New York, but also a Black artist in New York, really facing a certain kind of world for the first time, but also once again, bringing all that he knows with him, that history of victory, all what Toussaint Louverture represents and all that he may signify in that moment for him as a kind of grounding, a kind of buoy or lighthouse in a place where he clearly felt very much at sea, very much challenged.
It's basically autobiographical. I mean, I think he fancies himself as a Haitian revolutionary, but instead of being on the island of Hispaniola, he's on the island of Manhattan, trying to contend with the craziness of New York in the late 1950s, which he makes really clear was not the most welcoming place for Black people.
Télémaque plays with scale in this work, producing a large and epic painting that nods to European portraits of conquering heroes. But his hero, Toussaint Louverture, who led the only successful slave revolt in modern history, is not conquering in this instance. The painting is both an homage and a plea, diving in and out of history and Télémaque's own emotional world. Upon relocating to Paris, Télémaque found a diasporic home at last in the Caribbean modernist movement. Here's James again.
And for me, Caribbean modernism, it is about the act of creation itself and bringing some idea or concept or an aspect of Caribbean livity, making it central in one's practice. And for Télémaque, even though he was outside of Haiti, he never forgot it. He sort of carried it with him. There's a phrase, what good are roots if you can't take them with you, right? That's very West African. And for me, Télémaque sort of embodies that. He goes and he is in the rest of the world, but he's taking his formative culture with him when he goes. It's very much a part of his formal approach to the actual work itself, but it also mimics his life, who he is as an artist. He's an accumulation of experiences.
So I think that there was a real understanding on French ground that they had a real important intellectual artist in their midst who had this interesting lineage that extended through New York, through Port-au-Prince, and really reflected a kind of a globalism that often is just given lip service.
Télémaque was celebrated in France as a Caribbean artist and a member of a hybridized global modernist movement, a sharp contrast from his previous reception in the US. I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think he was so unrepresented in the US? Is it because he sort of straddles these different global modernist movements and doesn't quite fit the mold of a single one? Is it because he doesn't represent a particular version of Haitian or Afro-Caribbean art that we expect from that part of the world, that he's not kind of fitting Euro-American expectation? What reasons do you think are behind why he has been left out of certain canonical art historical narratives?
All of the above of what you've said. The other thing, though, I'll also add is that these Francophone pop artists tended to be very political. And it could very well be that the art world wasn't quite, at least when I say the art world, I mean New York, wasn't quite ready to kind of take on artists who might combine the mediated images. They were more comfortable with Marilyn than Fidel Castro, let's put it that way.
Télémaque remained invested in the local questions that occupied Haiti and the broader Caribbean diaspora, but his tendency towards abstraction was also a technique that enabled him to relate to global conflicts throughout the 20th and later the 21st century.
We find in his work subtle ways where we see him critiquing and exploring notions of racism and colonialism and imperialism. There was this horrific event that took place in the early 1960s, and there was a major confrontation between the gendarmes and the Algerian protesters.
De cette soirée, ne reste que ces images d'hommes, main sur la tête, la peur dans les yeux. À l'appel du FLN, ils étaient venus manifester à Paris pour dénoncer le couvre-feu. Un couvre-feu qui venait d'être imposé à la population algérienne. Ce 17 octobre 61, les forces de l'ordre vont faire payer très cher à ces manifestants pacifiques la mort de leurs collègues policiers assassinés par le FLN dans les mois précédents.
And one sees bits and pieces of that in a whole series of paintings that he does called the Banania series, which explores stereotypes and images from France's racist past. So Hervé, to me, incredibly has his hand on the pulse of ideas and issues that as an immigrant, as someone who comes from a place that was formerly colonized, a place that's under a dictatorship, that he has something to say, he has something to share.
À regarder ces quelques tableaux, il y en a très peu ici, et je me suis rendu compte que le contenu politique a l'air presque permanent, au-delà de ma conscience personnelle, et que, si vous voulez, je reste ancré sur le problème politique, malgré moi.
Seeing these paintings, I realized their political content seems almost omnipresent, and that it goes beyond my personal conscience. Despite myself, I seem to stay rooted to political issues.
Si vous voulez, je reste ancré sur le problème politique, malgré moi. Mon discours sur les représentations noires.
As you were speaking, it describes for me this way of seeing, this global modernist way of seeing that kind of pushes you into these different historical moments, these political movements, and it requires that you care about Vietnam, that you care about Haiti, that you care about Algeria, that you care about racism in New York, and this way of seeing that kind of requires that you look to all of these places.
And Donna, it's not linear. And that's what kind of is fascinating about it. I mean, he doesn't give you that easy story from way back when we were on the continent of Africa. No, he forces us to move back and forth constantly. And one could say that that kind of anti-linearity, that kind of the freedom to flow back and forth, is in some ways perhaps a more accurate picture of how one might think of one's position within the African diaspora.
Through his travels, Télémaque explored many angles of the Black Atlantic. This conceptual framework, as well as the actual space and experience of the transatlantic slave trade it refers to, encompasses African, American, Caribbean, and European diasporic lives, and encourages us to think beyond borders. Movement, in fact, is essential to the Black Atlantic experience. Here's Powell again on Télémaque's work.
His engagement with the Black Atlantic is layered, and I really emphasize layered here. It's a collage sensibility. One has to kind of be prepared to move across the surface of these works and engage with this spot and that spot and those words in English and those words in French, and take it in as a whole.
This collage format, which he retained in some form for his entire career, allowed him to play with time, form, and symbols. As the spiralist writers in Haiti in this era experimented with narratives folding in on themselves, so too did Télémaque. His references bounced from French cartoons to voodoo symbols to Othello, demanding examination and refusing easy categorization. As you're listening, pull up a Télémaque painting online, maybe no title, Ugly American from 1962, and sit with it. In the process of observing his body of work, try to pinpoint some of these collages of meaning. Bafflement, at least initially, may be part of the point. According to Powell and James, Télémaque used humor to tease out multiple layers in his work.
He was a raconteur. He had a twinkle in his eye. We laughed, we drank rum, but there was always this kind of dash of humor and vivacity to the narration, to the storytelling. And so you see that in the work, this kind of odd. In other words, he's not haranguing in these works. These are kind of playful, subtle critiques, but critiques nonetheless.
It's a puckishness. He wants to sort of start a conversation. And there's something very sobering the longer I look at Télémaque's work in this regard, because there is that playfulness, but there's a biting humor about it too. There's something very cloudy, very dark that comes in there that he's playing with. He turns it in a way that really plants something in our own psyche. We were talking about accumulation earlier, in that, what does it mean? Humor is something that we don't think of as critical. And it is fundamental to Caribbean life. It really is. I mean, having a sense of humor is considered a good quality. You will find that Caribbean people will tell a joke in the most crazy moment, in the midst of an earthquake. Even as they're going through very difficulties, it's as if humor itself can be a balm, but also a critique, that it serves different purposes. There's nothing I could do but laugh. There's nothing, so when he's doing that, when he's being mischievous, I think he's bringing to bear a little critique. Sometimes there's some bitterness in some of the works, especially ones, dealing specifically with his own story.
James finds personal resonance in Télémaque's use of humor as a tool of survival, which served as armor during his peripatetic travels and quest for belonging.
When life circumstances push you there to that precipice, humor just is that sort of hook that pulls you back, that says, I can try it again tomorrow. There's this saying in Haiti, behind mountains, there are just more mountains, right? But you have to keep climbing. You have to keep trying to, sort of move forward. And so there's that sensibility of survival. And I think I see humor just being a part of that.
Over many years of study, and as their friendship blossomed, Powell developed a great deal of respect for Télémaque's single-minded determination to pursue his artistic calling.
I was moved because this is a guy who painted until the end of his life. I mean, he had a stroke and he painted with one arm. And so we're talking about a resilience. We're talking about someone who perhaps is echoing the travails of his brothers and sisters on the island in a minuscule way through his art. Just an extraordinary, totally dedicated, focused painter, someone who, was inspirational.
Je rêve de peinture à peu près tous les soirs. Ce qui est quand même légèrement sénile, je reconnais. On fait de l'art non pas pour être avec soi-même, mais pour raconter, se raconter dans le monde tel qu'il est.
Télémaque's work remains worthy of study for its fearless and creative syncretization. His layered paintings span space and time to challenge our understanding of ourselves, our communities, and our world. However you encounter Télémaque's oeuvres in the future, we hope you carry these ideas of home, globalism, and resilience with you. What speaks to you in Télémaque's work? What sparks more questions? For now, we'll leave you with a song by one of Télémaque's favorite singers, Toto Vicente. Thank you for listening to Season 4 of Tomorrow is the Problem. Catch up on previous seasons at our website, where you can also learn about our latest exhibitions, pedagogical programs, and public lectures. We look forward to seeing you there. Tomorrow is the Problem is produced in partnership with Podfly Productions. This episode was written and produced by Thea Piltsecker and me, Donna Honarpische, in collaboration with Wilkin Brutus. Our executive producer is Jocelyn Aram. Our recording engineer is Carle Reem Neal. Our sound designer is Nina Pollock. Special thanks to Richard Powell and Erica Moya James for joining us on the show. Our music for this episode includes Toto Vicente's Ibo Ogun and Papa Loco. I'm Donna Honarpische. Thanks for listening.